Now, another purpose for the Attach button is attaching to a curve or an edge of a surface. And we have 5 different ways to do that. But in all cases, it's changing the initial coordinates of an edge of the mesh before it gets projected. So it's initialization of a different form. Now, the default is CURS. Now, I'll show you these by creating a curve and starting to attach to that curve.
Let's create a curve to attach the mesh to. From the main menu, select 3D Curve and then Spline, and the Curve dialog box will appear. In the Environment window, select the Pick panel and select Node. Now you're ready. Now select nodes with your mouse on your mesh in the physical window to form the points on the curve. When you are done, number and save your curve.
So I could attach this edge of the mesh from here to here to this curve by using the CURS command. Actually, the CURS and the CUR in this case would be identical. There's a difference only if it's more than one edge, and we just have one edge here. So I'm going to increase it to the entire length. Now I can use the CUR command, hit F1, and it's curve number 1. Now watch what happens. That edge of the mesh is now attached to that curve. Its initial position has been changed. But the thing to keep in mind here is when you use the CUR command, it places the nodes equally spaced all along that edge. Even though initially these elements were smaller, what has happened is the vertices along the partition here all of these interior vertices have lost their independence. They all have been constrained to be placed equally spaced along this curve. That is the nature of CUR. CURS, I'll undo this, use the CURS command, hit F1, curve 1. You see that each individual interval or edge is attached to the curve independently, such that these vertices still have degrees of independence or freedom. And one of the consequences of that is that I could change the initial coordinates of this vertex to this, attach. Notice I used attach, and it used the PB command to do the attach. And it then changed the interval that this particular component edge is using along that curve. It's doing each individual component edge independently. It first of all moves the vertice to closest point on the edge, on the curve I mean, and then it interpolates all the nodes in between the vertices to fall equally spaced on the curve. But otherwise, these are two very similar commands. Well, there's two more here. The CURE. That is like the CUR, except it'll guarantee that the first node is at the beginning of the curve and the last node is at the end of the curve. So it consumes the entire curve. It matches endpoints, and that's what the E is standing for. And now the CURF command is a very special curve attachment command, rarely used. There'll be times when you want to attach an edge of the mesh to a curve and have it freeze on that curve. In other words, it can't be moved. It can't be projected to a surface. It's frozen on that curve. Now, all 4 of these attach to a curve. This one is basically the same as CUR, but it's attaching the edge of your mesh to the edge of a surface instead of a curve. Otherwise, the same functionality. And they also get that command by using attach. Let me give you that example. I'm going to undo this. So we're starting fresh with this. Now, if I were to select the entire edge, no, let's take not quite the entire edge. Let's take part of it. And then I choose the curve. In this case, it's only one curve. And click on attach. That edge gets attached to this curve. And how is it done? It issued the CURS command, the default. I say it's the default because you can change this. When you attach to a curve, you can change it to another one of the curve attachment commands. But it starts out with this as the default. It's the most commonly used one. You can change the default by going to miscellaneous, and there's a command in here that changes the curve type when you use the attach button. So the attach button is kind of a encompassing way of initializing the mesh without really knowing or caring how it's done, whether it's CURS or one of these other commands. Getting back to the mesh menu, I want to point out that we now have another 5 commands that all work basically the same way, attaching an edge of the mesh to a curve or an edge. So I think the best way to summarize it is attach is when you change the initial position of part of the mesh. And that initialization then is what the projection method will use when it goes to project the mesh to whatever surfaces you've selected. Now, we haven't selected any surfaces here. I think I should make another surface or a surface so you can see what I'm talking about. I'm going to create a large sphere. Surface number 1, and it'll be a sphere, let's say 20, with a radius of 19. And now I want to point out that I've selected this edge to be attached to a curve. What I want to show you is that attach is initialization, just like moving things around is an initialization. It's not stuck there. It may look like it is, but it's not. Because if I were now to say, project this edge to this sphere, that's where it goes. Now, why would we attach it to a curve first and then project? That way, we can initialize the mesh with a curve, and then when it projects the closest point. So it'll preserve the shape of that curve. And that's what's happened here, to the extent that the projection would allow it to preserve the shape. Of course, there's not a whole lot of curvature in this from this viewpoint, and this is how it would be projected onto the sphere. So I'm not showing you an obvious thing. It's rather subtle. There are many uses of this. Keep that in mind, that that's a very useful feature, to have the ability to attach an edge to a curve and then project it to a surface.